America, my name is Osei-Frimpong. I come to you from time to time, and today we're going to talk about IVF, Caitlin Clark in the WNBA, and some remarks by Tom Cott. I'm just going to run through them. First, let's talk a little bit about IVF. I've been doing a little bit of work on IVF, in vitro fertilization, for a different project I'm on about parenting and children's rights to parents and all of that. And, I just read that you can get an egg from one place, sperm from another place, and then hire out a womb from a third place, and then I suspect have a child delivered to you from a fulfillment center, after you bought your egg for 10 grand. If you want like a high priced egg, you bought your sperm for quite a bit less than that, and then you have bought your surrogate for the womb. And what this does is, I worry, because I'm from California and I know a lot of very wealthy jerks, that this turns pregnancy into something that the poors do. Conceiving a child through traditional means becomes something that the poors do, and anyone who can afford to opt out of it then just chooses to opt out of it and kind of design their own babies that way. And I'm not really comfortable with that. So I would be, so I'm open to how we talk about what it means that science has now divided the activity of conceiving a child through the market, laundered it through the market in a way that it's not really clear whose parent this child is. You could say it could be the organized will that kind of, through the market, used their wiles to design the baby of their choice. But what if the baby doesn't come out the way that they had picked? Because for a variety of reasons, is it legitimate to say that they can return it? They can return it. Like if it's not, it doesn't seem to be of them in the right way, and the kid's relationship to the parent is going to be, I think, strange. And then what about siblings of these kinds of unions where the kids don't have anything in common except that they were picked by the genetic material was picked by the same parent, right? I think the siblings would be pretty much indifferent to each other. They'd be more like dorm mates who were picked by the same college than actual siblings, because there's not the same immediate relationship to them. There's just the same, abstract parenting, right? So I worry that this might seem like an abstract problem that we don't really have to worry about, but I think it's something that should be hammered out before it becomes a problem, because, like I said, I'm around a lot of rich people who would do this and then now have the justification for doing this and not think about the effect on the kid of not having parents. Now, this is different than adoption. I think of adoption as a second best thing for something happened to the parent, so we find other parents. Not as a design, but as a second best option. And so we happen to have couples who need kids, and we happen to have kids who need parents, and so we match them up, and that's fine. But adoption's a second best option, and it should be treated as a second best option. First option should be doing everything we can to make sure that parents can raise the kids that they conceive. Right? So I think we should worry about hard cases with IVF and not think of it from the parent's perspective in terms of, well, this is a very loving home and the parents want this kid, to the kid's perspective of, why should I feel tied to this parent? Why should I feel tied to this parent? And what it means for the kid to have, as a parent, the market liberalism, conceive this kid. And what does that mean? So I want, we need to think of things from the kid's perspective more. I think, I've done multiple shows about how divorce needs to be thought of from the kid's perspective. What does it mean to have irreconcilable differences among your parents, but you have to reconcile the fact that they're both your parents, and you have to get your understanding of both life and ways of life from them in irreconcilable visions. We don't think about this stuff enough, and I think it's low-grade child abuse, and that's what I'm writing on. But that's what I was just thinking about with IVF, that you can get an egg from someplace, a womb from someplace different, and a sperm from someplace, a third place. And it'll create a happy couple if we just think about it from the couple's perspective who wants a kid. But from the kid's perspective, it might create like a vacuum where they get a sense of like, who's my parent? Who is my parent in a unified way besides the market? They might come out with a worship of the market and fidelity to market liberalism in a way that's a little bit dubious. I think it's going to be a while before we have those kinds of kids, but that's kind of where my mind is right now about that. Now let's talk about Caitlin Clark and the WNBA. Women need to watch basketball and care about basketball and have played basketball and have their dignity invested in basketball and sports in general. Right? These same women who drove Titanic to become the highest grossing movie at the time, who drove Barbie to make $1.5 billion last year, who drove, who are a money machine for Taylor Swift, they don't care about basketball. And that's why Caitlin Clark's not getting paid as much as Wembanyama, because all those women's brothers and fathers, they do care about basketball in a way that the sisters and the women don't. So the problem is womanhood. Don't blame men for the fact that women don't like basketball the way that men like basketball. Maybe it's good. In my head, it's like hearing all these feminists complain about it's misogynistic that Caitlin Clark doesn't get paid more. It's like hearing Christian fundamentalists scream about the gender inequality in OnlyFans payouts. It's like, well, you don't like this anyway. So, you know, if you have a problem, support the service. But if you don't want to support the service, shut up. It's not like women are the largest consumer spenders in the nation. And it's not even close. Most of it's aren't because women buy groceries and stuff, but it's also because, you know, women spend money in ways that guys don't, right? So if they wanted to spend money on WNBA tickets or merchandise, they would. If they wanted to hype it up on their social media platforms and become WNBA influencers and talk about it, if they were into the game, they would be into the game. They're not into the game. Some are, but not enough. And so the salaries reflect that. So build a culture where women take sports as basketball and specifically, but sports in general, as seriously as like their male colleagues, and then that will trickle up into the professional leagues. But right now, women don't. Even at the youth level, co-ed leagues are mostly guys, like 6 and 7-year-olds, but mostly guys and a few girls. But that's culture. That's culture. And I find women's sports fascinating. I don't find them the same as men, but sometimes they're more. Like for a while, I'd watch women's tennis more than I would watch men's tennis. Women's gymnastics, I don't really care about men's gymnastics. I want to see women's gymnastics. So the aesthetics of basketball can admit women, and if women as a culture were as dedicated to the sport as men as a culture were, the women's game would be phenomenal because it wouldn't just be ruled by mutants who could, you know, throw down windmill slams. I don't need to see that. It would be a different quality of game. And I think it might even be better. It'd be great shooting. There's nothing that makes me believe that women with a women's ball, like, can't shoot as well as men. I think they're probably, I wouldn't be surprised if, since it opens up the demographic, since serious basketball has opened up to a larger demographic, women become better shooters. I wouldn't be surprised. But they would have to take the game as seriously as their male counterparts, which isn't the culture right now, and which is why, like, you know, listen, you all need to thank Title IX for funding women's college sports to begin with. So we took these women who trained a third as hard as their male counterparts in high school, and showed a third of a commitment, and then gave a bunch of scholarships and support. And now we have a robust infrastructure at the college level for women because, like, a lot of black men breaking their bones and going through like really, really torturous workouts that their female counterparts did not have to go through for as long, in order to make the college men's football and basketball game like the cash cows that they are, right? So let's stop pretending that women's rec leagues are as competitive as men's rec leagues, or women's youth leagues are as competitive as men's youth leagues. They're not. as boys' youth leagues. They're not. And once they become that way, and widespread, and there'll be a cultural change, then you'll have adult women watching the game. Because right now, like, sports fans are guys. Because I'm a sports fan because I think sports are a really good technology for actually realizing and kind of expressing the human will. That's why you have to have all of these rules to make it even, because what's actually being released is not necessarily the physics. You're not really marveling at the physics necessarily as much as you're marveling at the contest between the two people that's expressed in all of these kind of trained and technical feats of heroism. I always kind of harken back to Juliana Edelman's catch, maybe the 2016, 2017 Super Bowl, where it was just like a pure expression of will. He just wanted that ball in a way that the careening defenders didn't want to stop him, and he got it. And that's what the sport's about. It's wanted to see those expressions of will, not necessarily power, although it's expressed in power, but more what makes it human is that it's something that an animal could and wouldn't do. It's an expression of human will to decide that this admittedly arbitrary thing is so important that I'm going to do whatever it takes to get it, and like outthink my component, like outfocus my opponent. And that can be realized in training all the way up, and then it's expressed in the game. So until there's a culture of womanhood that supports that, then we get what we get. But don't tell me that the women who drove Titanic in 95 and 96, yeah, it's probably 96, to the heights that it went, 96, 97, or the women who, are money machine for Taylor Swift, or the women who are money machine for Barbie are somehow being obstructed from supporting women's basketball the way they should. They just don't like women's basketball. They just don't like basketball as much as their male counterparts do like basketball. It is what it is. All right. Last thing, Tom Cotton mentioned that with these anti-genocide protests that are stopping traffic in the street, that people should feel free to get out of their car and remove the protesters because they have places to go. And it's inconvenience, and no one to be inconvenienced. And if they tried that in Arkansas, you'd get thrown off a bridge. Try that in the Golden Gate Bridge, you'll be fine in California. But you try that nonsense in Arkansas, it won't end up very well. Now, if he was smarter, he would say something. He would fold in a reference about you'll end up like Bobby Joe. Gosh, who's the kid who got thrown off there's a 70s song about, let me look at the comments. If you know what song I'm talking about a kid who got thrown off a bridge. Anyway, you could work on about like if you're gonna stop a bridge in Arkansas or stop a bridge in Mississippi for a protest, you'd be willing to be thrown off the bridge like Bobby Joe or Billy Joe or however that song goes. Anyway, so what was interesting about Billy Joe McAllister? That's it. Be ready to be treated like Billy Joe McAllister. You go down like Billy Joe McAllister. So that would have, I think, landed the joke really well with a certain audience, and you're welcome. So what was interesting about Tom Cotton's comments was that he was saying that people shouldn't be inconvenienced by civil disobedience, which is fascinating because it's kind of it's a conservative outgrowth from stand your ground laws, right? So stand your ground laws are like, I should be allowed to use violence to protect my property, regardless of civil, like any sort of disobedience, any sort of protest. Right? And an outgrowth of that could be, I should be allowed to use violence to protect my my contribution as a member of civil society. I should be able to use violence to get to my meeting on time, my church on time, my job on time. I should be able to use violence in order to exercise my civil freedoms. Right? So that is an outgrowth of just the same sort of kind of, and this violence should be democratized, and I should be able to self-deputize myself to not call the police on these protesters, but I should be able to self-deputize and take matters in my own hands, get my own gun from my glove box and go and shoo these protesters who are obstructing my right to get to my job on time. Now, mind you, there was a different tune when the truckers were protesting, but in Canada, but like that, this is where the argument kind of is an outgrowth of the stand your ground argument. You should be able to deputize yourself and take matters into your own hands to use violence to secure your property rights and now your civil rights. And that is, I think, a growth of self-deputization, which I think is a little bit bizarre. And then, the last thing would be political rights, but we already kind of have that in the Second Amendment because that's what the Second Amendment's for. Except you're not really self-deputizing as an individual. You're supposed to form militias with other people in order to protect your political rights. So I think it's dicey. Now, we could have gone the other way with civil rights discourse. We could have looked at the 60s and saying, like, actually, we need to be willing to be inconvenienced for people who aren't heard through traditional means. And the people who actually think that, Gaza's a genocide, they're not heard through traditional means. They're being shut out of campuses. They're not on conservative radio. They aren't on liberal radio because NPR is just funded by the same corporate and rich white people who, who run the problem with mainstream media in general. So, like, there is no place for voices that are independent of corporate money to actually be heard. So you got to stop traffic. And if you want your message heard, if you actually think that, like, we are funding a genocide that would not happen if not for United States support, you're not going to be able to get that message out in a conventional way. So you need to be unconventional. Same reason with the standing degradation of Jim Crow. You weren't going to be able to get that message out in a conventional way, so you had to get it out in an unconventional way. And unconventional ways are inconvenient. Right? So, by the way, if you appreciate me talking like this, which you should, because not a lot of people will handle all of these issues with the kind of alacrity, cheerful willingness that I give to you at least once a week, possibly twice, go ahead and go to www.funkyacademic.com and it'll help me, grow the channel, help me do cooler things with my kids. By the way, in terms of kids, I'm kind of proud of myself. 2 weeks ago, they couldn't swim. I had 3 kids who, could kind of float. They took regular YMCA lessons, just 4 of them, but, whatever. Now, 2 weeks later, because of moi, they can go from one end to the pool on the other. All 3 can go from one end to the pool on the other on their back. And if they switch from back to front, and they could go freestyle one in the pool to the other. That's a 25-yard pool, so it's not like a full Olympic-sized pool, but a 25-yard pool, and go from one end to the other because of, every day, just kind of working with them. Because that's the kind of things, if you're serious about, making sure your kids can do things, you have to get in, you have to do it yourself. And I'm a huge fan of that. So the Osei-Frimpongs, they will not be drowning. Also, teaching my kids how to swim. I somehow ended up one of the strongest swimmers in my family. My mom, but it just made me realize that there are a lot of people who cannot swim. There are just so many people who cannot swim because someone actually has to teach you. There's technique involved. And this is a kind of a golden age for these kinds of things because with YouTube, I could learn all the technique I needed in videos and then teach my kids. And since I'm a pretty good teacher in general, I hope you've noticed that that you can, if you can watch YouTube, watch a few YouTube videos, watch, study, and then go and communicate this to your kids, and then you have swimming kids. And so now my kids and that's something that they'll never be able to not do. Like my kids, you can throw them anywhere now. And like in the last 2 weeks, now we've gone every day. We've gone every day, but because the YWCO is really close to us. But last, like that was delivered, and that was available because of some of the money you give me. So keep doing that, and we got soccer camps and all that stuff coming up. But I'm pretty proud of myself for teaching these kids to swim, and it was great. And I also gained respect for the kid from the boat who swam. The kid Aquaman, the guy who swam from the boat to participate in the fight down in Mississippi. I think it was in Birmingham. Because he did it in clothes, and that took a whole culture to get a kid prepared to meet his moment, to be able to swim, make it to shore, get up, and still have enough energy to fight. I gained respect for him after teaching my kids to swim. I'm like, oh, good. Well, his parents prepared him for this moment. And someone said, why don't I just say that black women don't typically learn to swim because of their hair? I am not a huge fan of womanhood in general as a culture. I like women, and I like women in other cultures, but America does not do great with respect to the culture of womanhood because there's nonsense about presentation and hair that keeps you from doing the kinds of things like playing basketball or swimming that I like people to do. I mean, I'm in the South now, so I meet people who don't sweat because of their makeup, and I refuse to sweat because it'll screw up their face. And I find these people ridiculous, and and I now am very serious about keeping my daughters away from these people because they're awful people. And their awfulness will come in the form of gender commitments. And that way I won't be able to be kind of a prophylactic to keep away their kind of awfulness because it came in through what it is to be a girl or a woman. So I pretty much keep girls and women away from my daughters so that they don't get screwed up. Well, I'm very careful in how I curate the girls and women who talk to my daughters because a lot of the junk that's a problem with womanhood in general and American womanhood in particular, and Southern womanhood comes in through gender, and you can't get around that as a guy unless they've been duly prepared prior to it. All right. Thank you for your time. I will talk to you at another time. And once again, if you appreciate what I'm doing, which you should, go ahead and go to www.funkyacademic.com, kick in $5, $15, or $50. And people say, why do women suck? The patriarchy. No, well, yes, but there's a kind of, it's more complicated than that because it pays to suck. And patriarchy is really not so much a gender game, it's a racial game. And so black women aspiring to white womanhood or the perks of white womanhood will become the worst versions of white women, and white women are already a problem because they are what they are because white men needed a reason to police black people, so they needed to make white women useless victims. And so anyway, the culture of useless victims who were taken care of by white women white men in order to account for the policing and the controlling of black men after emancipation. We had to legitimize the control of black men, so we created gender ideologies that fit that. Take care. Bye.